What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video, and I do want to start off by saying sorry about yesterday. Things kind of popped up and I really couldn't do much, and I do apologize for that. Now, let's jump straight in. Actually, no, let's do Discord shoutouts. My bad. So, thank you to everyone who joined my Discord. Emrist, Naokami, Tenga, Corbin, Forbidden Super, Hyperfan5, Ganao Sunwill, Senpai, Galco, and your mom's senpai. Thank you all for joining the Discord, and if you guys want to join the Discord, go down into the description down below. You know, I chat with you guys there, we have fun, and everything else is pretty a-okay there. You guys can make suggestions down there. You guys get information first before I even post in community tab. And also you guys can post your memes, host Among Us games, and even do self-promo if you're a YouTuber yourself. Now, let's jump straight into this what if. Where we last left off, Izuku had just recently finished the Heroes versus Villains test. Even though it wasn't Izuku, it was Arnos taking Izuku's, place in the matter. Arnos was still quite confused about how to get back. His power was not fully back yet, and he really couldn't even embrace a smaller percentage of it, mainly because doing so was out of his capabilities. Seeing how he was reincarnated twice very recently, he could only use 1% of his power rather than being able to go out a full 100% or even 10% of his power. This caused Arnos to be kind of confused about the situation. He knew he had ways to fix it, but if he tried to, it could end up endangering the boy's source energy. That was one of the things Arnos found quite confusing. Everyone over here seemed to have source energy, just like from his world, but all the source energy seems to be slightly skewed. Almost like a worldwide experiment had been done to all these people. And now all their energy is slightly changed and altered. Not the same way it used to be when they were first born. Arnos related this back to quirks. See, he figured that quirks might be an extension of source energy, but more like innate spells rather than just traditional spells itself, which Arnos thought to be very weird, seeing how original magic, which is the magic that is used when someone creates a spell, seem to be distinctly different from these innate original magic spells. These ones seem to work differently. Almost like the magic over here has a different wavelength or different base properties. It doesn't seem like the person has to even chant to initiate a spell at all. Arnos barely had to chant for most of his stuff that he wanted to do, and even the bigger spells he only had to say about 1 to 2 words, which was counted as being amazing. But here they don't even have to say anything, which would be tolerated as better than amazing. Usually people that don't have to say anything to activate their spells have such a deep understanding of their spells that tends to be the only thing they ever trained. But it seems to be different here. Arnold shrugged his shoulders. He knew thinking about it won't really fret himself. He ended up going to school. He acted his normal way. Of course, his personality was slightly skewed, mainly because of Izuku's, but he still acted very similarly how he would act back in his world. He proved people wrong who thought they were better than him, and helped out people who he thought as friends or companions. Eventually, as the weeks gone by, Arnos slowly started to regain some of his formal power, now being able to use 2% rather than the base 1% he was at prior, mainly through extensive training. So Arnos figured that if he would like to get back all of his power, he would have to train very extensively over a long period of time. Arnos figured he would be able to take care of what he needed to take care of about around at 10% to send him back to his own timeline. But this would be kind of long and takes a long time to do, seeing how after 2 weeks he had only grown a singular percent. Eventually he was seen in class when the teacher that he had came to know as Shoto Aizawa, that is not his name, oh my god, what the fuck, Mr. Aizawa, god, why did I say Shoto? My bad, guys. I totally went off topic there. Mr. Aizawa entered the room and explained to them that they would be going to the USJ. Most kids figured it was the United Studios of Japan, when Arnos really just didn't care about what it was. He didn't care what it was, all he knew is that he needed to get it done to progress in this world, so he decided to take care of it. Eventually, it was explained that it was an unforeseen juncture event, or situation, which kind of made sense to Arnos. Preparing them in case of any emergency would be very useful. Eventually, they all got on the bus, as Arnos got taken there. Eventually, the kids started talking about their quirks, and one by one they all talked about their quirks. But when it came to Arnos, Arnos almost stated that he didn't have a quirk and that he had used magic. But then remembered that magic did not exist, or at least did not exist in the same vein as it had done in his own world. So Arnos stated that his quirk allowed him to manipulate energy freely, which obviously was a lie, but most people were kind of confused. So they asked, how did you create that ice, then, to freeze the entire building? This was one of the things Todoroki was very interested in, because having another ice user in the class was kind of cool. Arnos then explained, well, when you remove the heat by slowing down the vibrations of the molecules by removing their kinetic energy, that decreases the friction, causing the temperature in the area to lower, causing it to get to freezing point in the atmosphere, which condenses and then freezes around the building, causing it to become frozen solid. I just did it on a much larger degree and very quickly, giving it the appearance of it being flash frozen. This kind of impressed Todoroki. You know, he never thought of his quirk as just taking and giving off energy. But maybe if he could think about it this way, maybe it would work better. Eventually, some of the other kids asked what else could he do, and he explained, well, if someone died, I could technically rewind their body back to a previous point, or make a copy of their body. How does that work with energy, Bakugo asked. Bakugo isn't dumb, and he knew instantaneously that energy doesn't work that way. And then Izuku explained, have you ever heard of the rumored particle called tachyon particles? Particles that are said to deal directly with time. Well, you see, when tachyon particles move forward, time accelerates. But when you take the tachyon particles and move them backwards, they decelerate. Or reverse time. All the kids were kind of confused by this statement, mainly because tachyon particles were still just a relatively theorized thing. They don't actually exist, but if what Izuku said was true, that means no one could die around him. He could just rewind them back to a point where they were alive. Izuku thought that would be enough to cover it up, even though, to most outside people, they would call BS on his quirk. Izuku figured covering it up like that would work the best currently. And eventually he said, try not to ask any more questions about my quirk. It gets more confusing the more we talk about it. Most of the other kids understood what Izuku was getting at and just didn't ask more about his quirk. It was simple enough to let the boy chill, and no one really had a need to ask about his quirk. Eventually, they arrived at the USJ. They entered the building, and Izuku saw what he thought was a woman in a white spacesuit. Now, most people might have been wondering how he knew it was a woman, and that was mainly because of her source energy. He could see it clearly, and it was very obviously female source energy, not males, so he automatically knew. Eventually, Izuku ended up realizing that that was the hero 13, and that 13 was a well-known hero for her many escapades in the rescue division of hero work, which Izuku thought was pretty cool, seeing how her quirk was called Black Hole and it could automatically destroy anything. Pretty amazing. Eventually, she ended up started explaining everything and said that today they would be taking a practice. Izuku felt something very weird. At the center of the room, Arnos instantaneously noticed that this source energy seemed to come off very evil, like it had been tainted with black miasma. He instantaneously looked to the center and saw a portal start to form. He instantaneously knew that something was wrong. There would be no way a teacher would let anyone enter this room, especially because it does not make sense. He looked around to try to see if he could notice anything about it, but he couldn't. Eventually, Izuku ended up pointing it out to the teacher, and the teacher saw it. She told everyone to quickly evacuate, but before they could do anything, they all got teleported to different areas by the same weird black smoke that had teleported them earlier. Izuku was the first to realize this and clicked the inside of his mouth. He looked around and saw that Sue and Mineta were with him, and saw that there were multiple villains inside the water. Izuku decided that wasting time was not a smart decision, and grabbed both Mineta and Sue, as he then quickly froze the water beneath him. He then looked towards the rest of the area and saw the light fighting that was going on. Izuku thought this was very insane. Why was fighting happening inside this area? Eventually, Izuku looked around and saw a man at the center. After freezing the entire lake, almost all the villains looked over to where Izuku was currently floating above the ground, carrying 2 personnel with him. He stepped on the ice and slowly walked over to the center of the room. He told Sue and Mineta to quickly run back to the teacher in case of anything happened to them. Much to their dismay, of course. Well, more to Sue's dismay rather than Mineta's dismay. Izuku walked to the center of the room, and a man looked at him straight in the face. This man had blue hair and had weird hands covering his entire body. And he said in a raspy voice, "So you want to play hero, kid?" Izuku looked towards the man, very confused by the man's statement. Izuku kind of laughed and said, "No, I don't want to play hero. I just want to get home. Currently, you're injuring my best chance at getting home. You know, I think of myself as a benevolent guy, and I don't really get angry too often. But this display here has gravely upsetted me." Izuku started to say as a giant red circle appeared beneath him. He usually tried to keep his magical circles hidden, but Izuku was pretty upset this time, and a magic circle appeared so everyone could see it, including the teachers, which thought it was very weird. Izuku then said, "So, you guys like to use magic, huh? How about I start off by canceling that?" Izuku then snapped his fingers, and all of the purple portals disappeared. Shigaraki was very confused about what's going on. He didn't understand who this boy was or why this boy had easily taken control of the situation like he had. Eventually, Shigaraki looked towards the boy in a very demanding tone and asked, "Who are you?" Izuku then ported right next to Shigaraki's ear and said, "I'm Arnos voldigoad, the Demon King of Tyranny." He then ported away before Shigaraki could touch him. And then Izuku chucked a sword towards Shigaraki. Shigaraki touched the sword with all 5 of his fingers, trying to disintegrate as quickly as he could, but found that he couldn't. And then the sword magically impaled his hand, and then stabbed his hand towards the ground, causing Shigaraki to shout in pain. Izuku looked towards the man, and then, with one look in his eyes, the man before him quickly evaporated into nothingness. Izuku, mildly, still angered with this action, looked towards the man that was practically black smoke at this point. He knew that the other guy should not be killed, so he brought him back to life, using Igneo. Shigaraki was brought back and was hyper confused about the situation and what was going on. Izuku then explained that he had resurrected him. Shigaraki called bullshit as his whole world flashed black again. And then suddenly he was back sitting in front of the boy again. Izuku looked to Shigaraki and he's like, "Believe me now? What kind of bullshit are you using?" "Nothing. I'm just using magic." "And the magic, well, kind of saves me." Now, see, there's a funny theory with this magic, as Izuku once again killed Shigaraki and resurrected Shigaraki once more. Shigaraki was slowly starting to get more scared and scared. He then stated that, "See, this magic allows me to kill and then resurrect whoever I wish. As long as it's within 3 seconds, it's relatively safe." Now, see, the theory with this magic is that they wonder if it's the same body and soul that gets resurrected, or a copy of the body and soul prior to their death, as Izuku once again kills Shigaraki and resurrected him. Izuku kept doing this for a set amount of time afterwards, watching Shigaraki eventually end up losing all sense of sanity. But he kept doing it repeatedly, to the horror of everyone else that was present at the area, seeing Shigaraki die and then come back and then die and come back and then die and come back and then die and come back. Eventually Izuku sighed as he left Shigaraki rendered unconscious, sitting on the floor with tears streaming down his face. He then looked to Kataguri and he said, "I recommend that you get out every single one of your friends and leave this location now. If you waste my time any more than you already have, this punishment will only be the start." Do you hear me? Am I speaking English well enough for you? Kataguri says, "Yes, sir. I understand your statement well enough," as he quickly gathered Shigaraki and left. Eventually, Izuku went back to everyone else. There was no one really there. Most of the kids had fled at the start, and a few teachers were there that were called in after one of the kids made it back first, and had saw Izuku's horrific display of his quirk's strength. It was so scary that none of the teachers really knew any way to talk to Izuku and reprimand him for fear of it happening to themselves. But then Izuku spoke up and said, "Don't worry. What I just did will not happen to you." He got what he deserved for being ignorant and trying to murder multiple of my friends and classmates. As long as none of you try to attempt the same action, you guys will never meet the same fate. Izuku said that as then he walked out of the classroom, out of the USJ, and boarded the bus and waited to head back to school. And that's where I'm going to leave this episode off, guys. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, goodbye.